I'm Stephanie.
Hi, I'm Angela.
We are the Ink Mages. Join us as we discuss all things fantasy, world building, storycraft, myths and legends, and of course, our own imaginative stories. Yeah, I know, and your stories have a lot of magic. So I love like the magic that you have in your story, and you've got a few characters who delve in magic. One's like an ancient old magic, and one's kind of a newer magic. So kind of explain when you were writing that story how you were going to approach Merlin's magic.
Yeah, and I think for me, and that's I think why the magic for me is very much in mythology and legends, because I almost like to take this idea. Eventually, I'd love to just create a whole other world of ethereal magic that's just got rules of its own. But a
Mm-hmm.
lot of my stories and my current series, I try to create almost like the supernatural world if it could really exist. What would the rules be like in our real world if mythology was real and
Mm-hmm.
dragons weren't a fantasy, they just are extinct? You know what I mean? Like all of these, those are the kinds of questions that I ask myself. Like, what is the supernatural? How does the magic function? And in my stories, I have a younger version of Merlin working with more of what you call a natural magic.
I
Um,
love it. I
and
love the magic he wields.
thank you. And it's hand in hand because I'm very strong in like the historical references, like who would the people of the 500s or the 6th century have been like? What was their history? What did the landscapes look like? And then there's the whole concept of Druidism on the Celtic plain that was very real and alive in that day and age. It was almost those were their priests. Those were the people that led them politically. Even it was the Druids. They were the ones that kept nations together. They were the ones that declared people chieftain or king or any of that. They had so taking that idea of a world changing and morphing outside of what was, which was a heavy-handed Druidism that would have had magic, natural magic, and that they learned how to work with, to a world that was changing because of the Romans and invading Saxons, and then adding in this whole fantasy element of Arthurian legend with monsters and creatures, and again kind of almost seeing beyond the veil, like maybe these creatures did exist, but it's just that not everybody could see them, or maybe
Mhm.
they could
Yes.
only be seen when the veil was open enough for everybody to be able to see through it, almost more like demons and angels
Mhm.
interacting, but demons and angels maybe not taking on the characteristics that we originally thought that they would, like
Yeah.
maybe an angelic being could be more like a dragon.
Ooh,
Or,
yeah.
a demonic, being could be more like a scary wolfhound that,
Yes.
devours your soul,
Oh my god. You have some very creepy, scary creatures in your story, and that wolfhound, that gave me chills.
Oh, thank
Yes.
you, thank you.
So
Sometimes as a writer, I surprise myself, like how dark I go sometimes with my bad guys. I'm like, wow, that was in me. That's a surprise, even to myself, especially, we were talking earlier, like I'm not the type of person to pick up a Stephen King book, not because I don't think
mhm.
he's a fantastic, prolific writer, but I just can't handle it. Like, I can only handle certain movies and certain levels of scary. And
Yes.
sometimes the stuff that I pull out in my characters, it's definitely not fairyland.
Yeah.
Can be a little
I don't want
gory
my
and violent.
I don't want my dream life getting invaded by super scary stuff, but, when
Yeah.
it does happen, it's like, "Hmm, I can make use of this."
Yes, exactly. Yes. And I think you were talking about the origins of your story kind of coming out of a dream. And, for me, it was a similar experience. It was powerful enough that it made me go, I have to tell this story because it wouldn't let me go. I wouldn't say I
Mhm.
necessarily had a dream, but this idea or this story occurred to me that was so powerful that whenever I would be in the car with my husband and we'd be driving, I'd be lost. My brain would be in la la land, imagining this dream. My husband would be calling me back, like, hey, I've been talking to you. Are you listening to me? And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, I was lost. And, when I would lay my head down at night, this story would roll through my brain like a movie.
Yeah.
And I actually resisted it for a while because I'm like, what? Because I did not consider myself originally someone who was capable of writing a whole novel. I had
Same here.
taken writing classes. I had, an idea of how to write grammatically, although recognizing that becoming a fiction writer, there's a whole other set of rules that go
Yep.
with writing those worlds.
We're still
Maybe
learning.
we'll break that down eventually in some episodes.
Mhm.
But I was really doing something I'd never done before, but because it was such a powerful story that was playing in my imagination, I was like, I can't let this go. I've got to try. I've got
Yeah.
to put this out on the page. And that's where the magic for me really came in. It was like, as I wrote it, I started understanding why people write. You
Mm.
get to know what's going to happen in your story. You get to like really let that imagination activate and go places you never thought you could. I mean, what I was imagining in my brain was powerful, but once I put my
Mhm.
hands to the keyboard and started typing, the stuff that came out was even more amazing to me. I was like, wow, this is what actually happened. This is how all of the bits and pieces actually came together. And it was really fun getting to take a character that I've always been fascinated with characters like Gandalf and
Mhm.
Merlin and kind of these
Sages.
sages. Yeah, we're
Mm.
the ink mages, we love
Yeah.
magic. But just this idea of these people who were wise and good,
Mhm.
and could do magic. They weren't all powerful, but they yet had this essence of having a power that could deliver, could be more than what a normal person could do. And it was fun taking his character and making him more relatable, kind of a younger character,
Yes.
and then inserting my new character into the world, Eleanor, who kind of there's a sci-fi time travel element to my story,
Love
where she
that.
she kind of comes in, and I think it was almost like I didn't write Eleanor to be me, but I think for me it was the window of
Mhm.
me being able to explore this world that I absolutely had a fascination with, this legend that I hoped could be true. And I get the super nerdiness part of me where I'm like, there was a Merlin. In fact, there were a few Merlins. There
Yeah.
was, a few different leaders that people would have said in history were Arthur. And so there are these elements of history that were real that fascinates me. I'm like, so let me tell you the real story. That was kind of my magical moment. I'm going to tell you what really happened.
Ooh. Yes. I love that because there are a lot of different legends surrounding Arthur and Merlin, and it kind of gives you a freedom though to explore your own avenue. And which I love the avenue you explored
Thank you.
because I was a big fan of the BBC show Merlin, which I think had 5 seasons. And when it ended, I was so sad because there wasn't that much like fantasy magical stories out there. So when I found out what you were writing, that you had written like a continuation story, I said, like, shut up. I have to read this. And I just loved it because I love your approach of Merlin being younger, like timeless,
Mhm.
just kind of how Merlin was in the show. And you've added a romance component, the sci-fi time travel. It's just wonderful how that's all woven in there. And you're just kind of waiting and hoping that somehow Arthur is going to make it back on the scene because that is like how the legend ended too, that he went into slumber after
Yeah.
experiencing that mortal wound. So the fact, yeah, I can't go to spoilers because people just have to read it. So if you haven't read Merlin and the Magic of Time, you're definitely going to want to do that.
Well, and there is a little bit of like, I always, when people come to me and they're like, well, I'm not really a writer, I write fan fiction. And I'm like, no, you're a writer because a lot of stories, I mean, even C.S. Lewis will tell you that a lot of his stories originated, and even J.R. Tolkien, in Norse mythology and books that they
Mhm.
had read, George MacDonald, some of these books that they read that you actually can see the echo of in their stories. And I think the magic, I think even for writers, is when I read other people's stories or I'm watching a show and all of a sudden it like dislodges ideas.
Yeah.
It inspires me. And I know like the Merlin show, I love that show because I was already like a super nerd when it comes to Arthurian legend. And that was a
Mhm.
completely kind of new take on the legend itself. And it kind of, I think, jostled loose in me this idea that it didn't have to be, what we'd always heard of Arthurian legend, that there could be more to the story. And I think what I loved about that series, and I love about Arthurian legend, and a lot of stories, even the stories that you wrote, that is a theme um, in my stories, that I find magic. And it's something that I very strongly want to make sure is a line throughout my stories is brotherhood. And I
Yeah.
think what I loved about that Merlin series, and I definitely tried to capture in my books, was the fact that the Merlin character unselfishly continued to fight for kind of this pompous, arrogant, but lovable Arthur.
Yes.
Um, he sacrificed everything. He had to
Mhm.
hide who he was the entire time, serving him just completely selflessly, this love of somebody else. Um, being willing to lay down your life. And I know that's kind of like the hero's journey, but I think that really captures um even I just got done watching the Supernatural series, and I think I was like, what was it about this series that captured people? And I'm like, it was these two
Mhm.
brothers that would
Yep.
live and die for each other.
Yep.
Like, there's something about that love that is very magical to a reader, because I think there's a huge piece of us that resonates with wanting that reality in our own life, wanting to be that person that would live and die for somebody. I think that's even like my husband, he loves military,
Mhm.
movies and
I do
stories,
too.
and it's that brotherhood. That's what
Yes.
I think resonates with him.
And
And
that's so strong in the Lord of the Rings series
yes.
specifically. Like,
Yeah.
everything is like a brotherhood or a friendship. And, Gimli and Legolas are unlikely people to actually have formed a friendship, but they do. And,
Yes.
it just evolves and grows by so at the end of their lives, they're like, we're gonna sail to Valinor together. Who would
Yes.
have thought? Frodo and Sam, huge friendship bond there. Where, Sam's going to lay down his life in a sense for Frodo and help him with his goal. So those are powerful themes, and I love exploring those themes because the brotherhood um, is just powerful. It's moving. It's relatable. I have a brother, so we grew up just he would give me all his Star Wars books to read. We had a beautiful bond. He got me playing video games, so I love incorporating the brotherhood angle in there because I know what it's like to have a loving brother who's encouraging me, you know.
That is, it's a I don't know, there's something so beautiful about that whole concept. And that to me is it took me a long time to discover that. But it was like all of these stories, like J.R.R. Tolkien and other stories that I would, or movies that I'd watch. I love movies. I think I love movies almost just as much as I love reading. I love a good story. And I asked myself that question. I was like, what is it about this that makes me, after I've read it or after I've watched the movie, lay down and not be able to stop thinking about it? And
Mhm.
that's kind of what I arrived at. It's that bond, that friendship, that brotherhood. I didn't grow up. Grew up with sisters, which I think is a little bit of a different experience than growing up with. You have a sister too,
I
but
do. I've got two, so I got
yeah,
to
well,
experience both sides.
you got both sides, but just that I think especially too. I love actually. I've told a few people this who I've encouraged to pick up your books, that I hope this comes across as a compliment, but that masculine theme, there's something very masculine about how you write, the grunginess, the grittiness, that makes when your characters do something loving even more
Mhm.
impactful. You're like,
Yes.
wow, even this nitty gritty, group of characters, or these characters that are prideful and stubborn. And,
Mhm.
with women is characters, which I love. And I'd love to talk about female characters, maybe in another
Yes.
podcast, maybe break down even why we write the characters that we do. Um, but women have a tendency towards compassion and being softer and having that more maternal edge, whereas men, sometimes you see it in glimpses. Especially when you're talking about warriors that are rugged and they carry swords and they've been through battles, they're scarred,
Yes.
they're traumatized, and for whatever reason, and when they choose to do something loving or self-sacrificing, there's something about that magic, that glimmer, that makes me want to keep reading, makes me want to
Mhm.
keep writing. And I've worked very hard, particularly in book 3, trying to capture that essence as best as I could. You do that very well with your characters in Conjurer's Curse.
Thank you.
Yeah, no spoilers. We can't use spoilers, but
No, as much as we'd love to.
yes, yes.
I've got a book 3 too that I'm writing that I would just love to broadcast what's going on with my characters, and it's rewarding when you have a very macho, masculine, arrogant character who's finally starting to learn what it means to not be selfish. Like,
Yes.
yes, I just want to like cheer you and
Yes.
like applaud you that you're learning, So
It's the Steve Harringtons. It's the Han
yes.
Solos.
Yes,
You
we
know?
love them, we adore them,
Yes.
and when they finally kind of relax a little bit on their brashness and their ruggedness, I'm like, "Oh, you do have a heart under that
Yes.
bravado exterior, and now I love you."
Yes, exactly. There's something so satisfying and fun uncovering those characters. I've been very inspired by those characters. I've actually really I have another book that I am very excited to get started on when I'm all done with rewrites of book 3, that I'm hoping to kind of I think that's where it's so fun talking to other writers, and authors, and talking about fantasy, is that you're like, "Oh my gosh, I'm really inspired. I would love to write a character like that."
Mhm.
And I think that's something that, even as I'm rolling around with the stories that I'm writing and allowing that magic to happen, you don't wanna, it's like you want to write a certain character, but you want it to really like latch on to you first, so that you really get them and that
Yes.
you love them and you have a feel for them. So you're not just writing a character because you're writing them because they're meant to exist. You're writing them
Mm,
because they
I
they
like that.
captured you magically to begin with. So it creates a genuineness in the stories that you write when they're actually there with you, like you said, capturing you, telling you how the story should go, and
Yes.
um, how they're going to react to certain circumstances. Certainly, and I think even with my stories, I think that's where I'm trying to bring people into that magical realm that I want to experience, where, like you said, there is a history. There was something that existed before even my story even began. There's something that
Yes.
will exist after my story
Mhm.
began. And bringing in even some of the stories of Celtic myth, I put my own twist on them, but old stories of Celtic myth, old stories of Arthurian legend, old songs that I've kind of woven within this brand new story, to kind of bring to life this history that I'm not maybe giving you the whole story, but I'm giving you, and that's J.R. Tolkien to me
Yeah.
in a nutshell. Is for years nobody knew that he had written history upon history and
Yeah.
languages and all of these things. He just wrote Lord of the Rings, and we all felt it
Yes.
magically. We knew that there was more that existed to the story than what we could see on the page.
Yes.
And then we discover later that there is so much more, which is a huge inspiration for me when writing.
Yeah. It's so vast. The possibilities for your world could just grow and grow and grow, and you gotta let that magic flow as you are creating, because an idea can pop in and take you in a beautiful, magical place you would have never gone if you were super rigid, in the process. So pants are here. I'm just gonna say it. I don't outline. I think Angela does a better job of figuring out her chapters, which amazes me. I'm just like, "Ugh, I don't know. I guess we'll see where someone so and so wants to do and where they need to go."
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love that. So you would call yourself I actually just learned this term not that long ago. You would call yourself a pantser, which means
Mhm.
like flying by the seat of your pants and writing
Yep.
the story as it comes to you.
Yes. And well, it allows the freedom for my characters to kind of do what they want to do. I have a
Mhm.
very loose idea of where the story needs to end. I'll have a great starting point, a launch, and then I'll get to usually a place where it's like, okay, let's scale back. What is going to be my main third act climax? So how do I get my characters there in a natural way? So
Yes.
it can be trial and error, but I feel like most of the times if I just let my characters talk and do their thing, that we figure it out.
And do
So there
you
are
do you because you don't plot, but do you kinda know where you're going? Do you know where your ending is, or is sometimes that just a complete surprise to you by the time you get there?
uh I feel like it has been a surprise at times, but for the most part, I just have an idea because if I know what the goal is, like with the Conjurer's Curse, my 17-year-old albino Rowan discovers that he has a curse. So right in like the first chapter, he's told, "Hey, you're banished. You need to go search for your people and find a way to break your curse." So it's like right there, that's going to be the gist of the plot for the most part is like he needs to break his curse. So naturally, step by step on his journey, I kind of figure out how he's going to get to that place. So I have an idea of an ending, but I don't know how everything's going to go down. That's what
Right.
makes it magic. That's how magic happens. Having a loose idea and then letting the story just flow and bringing in elements that you may never have thought were going to happen. I was going to write the entire book from Rowan's point of view. And then again, when you step back and you realize, I think I need to write a villain or an anti hero's point of view here because I need to see the other side of the story. And that's where
Mm.
you get to explore like brotherhood a little bit. I don't want to say
Yeah.
too much, but yeah. So I wasn't going to do that. And it just came naturally and started writing that character's point of view. And he just came from my thoughts so naturally. I'm like, I was surprised. I was
Yeah.
surprised how voicey he was.
Yes, I love the dialogue from the character that you're talking about. It's just one of my favorite things of that series. I don't know, it's amazing the magic sometimes as you're writing, just the characters and the things that come alive that you're like, "Wow, I don't even know where this came from. I don't even know how this manifested, but it did, and it's so good."
Yeah. My husband was making fun of me the other day. I think it was like a week ago. We were at the table, my kids are there, and I just started laughing at something Akron and Ravel were talking about. And I get weird looks from my kids, and they're like, what are you laughing about? I'm like, oh, Akron and Ravel, they're always just jokesters. They're always saying things that are funny. And my son Paul says, but you wrote it. Like, and my husband Alan said, like, she's a writer. Writers are weird. It doesn't make sense. I'm just like, hey, characters come alive. They have their own
Yes,
persona, and I'm just like a conduit that's capturing it. And I
yes,
don't know if that makes sense to everybody unless you are a writer, but if that clicks with you,
yeah,
then I do think you are a writer.
yes,
And if the story starts just because you have an idea for a character or you have a one-line thesis plot idea, then you need to put that magic down on paper or,
absolutely.
type
Yep.
it.
Yes,
Yes, because we want to read it. The
yes.
world needs to see and read that magic and feel it.
Absolutely. And it is really an extraordinary something that it's hard to describe until you become the writer and you start writing it down on the page and you start seeing your story come to life and kind of take over. Like you're a pantser, I am a plotter. I got my story from beginning to end. However, I didn't, it was like the basic bones, the meat and
Mhm.
everything else that was supposed to be there wasn't there. And as I wrote, there were a lot of things that changed or I thought were going to happen that didn't happen. Scenarios that I thought were going to be a main part of the story that up, my characters changed it because I started the journey. Like I had the ideas. Stephanie knows. I actually plot my
Yep.
books out by chapters, so I just write all the chapters down.
That's impressive.
And then I start writing. And really what they are, I think we all have our different ways of doing this if you're a plotter, but I don't want to forget the ideas and the sequence of events that happened in my imagination as I was laying in bed at night. So I write them all down kind of like episodes or chapters or scenes so that I don't forget them. I just write the main idea, kind of like a chapter title. And so it's there to remind me. But I don't know how many times where I'm like, oh, I got to delete all 5 of those.
Oh, no.
My characters decided that wasn't going to happen, that there was going to be a whole new series of events that was going to occur. But I love those surprises. I even said like book 3 without a whole lot of spoilers. There was a whole love story that just magically popped in my head. And for me, it was one of my favorite parts of the book. I was like, wow, of course, this is going to be so fun to put into the book and have another edge. I always love a good love story. I'm not a huge on like romancy, but I love a good love story like Pride and Prejudice,
Me
you know.
too.
So when those little love stories kind of pop in there, I'm always like, this is great. This is going to be great.
You put a little romance arc in any story, you're going to have me for the most part.
Yeah. I love stories. Just, maybe we'll have to have another episode on just love stories. And maybe the reason why they grip us. But even my husband, he hates to admit it, but he loves a good rom-com. And he certainly is a huge Jane Austen fan. It's so funny to me because he's like the Braveheart. He likes the military, dramas and mobster movies. Like he does not watch all of the fantasy stuff that I like to watch or care about some of the stories that I really resonate with. But he loves a good love story. And that's what our language is. He's always like, nope, not romance. It's a love story. I like the love stories. Don't like the romance. He's like, there's too much gazing into each other's eyes and romances. Oh, but I digress.
Yeah.
It's good to have those in the stories. In fact, I think when I was first writing my the original draft of book 1, he's like, it's like fantasy and adventure meets Jane Austen.
Yeah.
I thought, it's a compliment.
I'm hooked.
Thank you.
Well, this has been wonderful chatting with you about how the magic happens.
Let's
go. We would love to hear from you too. If you are a writer or reader, what grabs you in stories and how does the magic happen for you? We are going to have another podcast where we're going to be talking about all our love of storycraft and fantasy. So I hope you will tune in next time.
Yep. And be sure to subscribe to our podcast. Also be sure to share. We want to share the love and let all of your nerdy fantasy lovers know about our podcast and that they can join in with the discussion. Please leave comments. Let us know what your favorite stories are. Let us know your process or maybe any questions that you want us to elaborate about in one of our podcasts. Let us know. And thanks for joining us.
Until next time.
All right. Bye.
Bye.